Hi, John Cordisco back again from Cordisco's Chess Center in Binghamton, New York, in upstate New York. I was looking over a game that I played in the New York State Championship last year in the under 1600 section. Interesting game. It's a game that I had basically won and missed it because I was analyzing the endgame to death. I'm going to call this game Paralysis by Analysis. And I was black in the game, and this was in round 5, board 68. It's quite a big tournament. Anyway, I'm white and I went e4, or excuse me, I'm black. Let me switch that, and I played the Scandinavian d5. He took knight to f6, and he went c4. Some of my favorite lines here. What I did was I went e6, which is called the Icelandic Gambit from what I gather. It mixes some very lively play. Unfortunately, I didn't play it right, but still was an interesting opening. He went d4, and you go queen to e7. He went b3, and I played bishop takes c4 check. Discover check on the king. He blocks it with the bishop. Now probably what I should have done, I probably should have moved my bishop back here or here. Unfortunately, I didn't do that. What I did was I played bishop takes c2. He played queen 8 takes c2. I wasn't doing terribly well in this tournament, so I think I was just trying to simplify it and try to get into an endgame to just try to beat him in the endgame. I don't want too many complications. He played knight takes. I played knight c6, attacking the d-pawn. White castled, and I castled long, hitting the pawn here again on d4. He went bishop d3, guarding the pawn. I went knight to b4. Might as well get my knights involved. He's got an isolated pawn. There's a lot of room in here. There's a lot of weak squares. Here and here is both weak. Just trying to tie him up a little bit. I went knight c3. And I went the other way, knight g4. Trying to make him a little crazy with my knights. He attacked. Now, I had thought about this for a while, taking that bishop on e3. It connects the center pawns. It ends up being a problem for me later, but what I was thinking at the time, I recall, is he'll have 3 different pawn islands. And in an endgame, that could be to my advantage. So I played knight takes, bishop, and he played pawn takes. I went f6. This rook was on my f-pawn. And he went rook f3. Looks like he's going to double up his rooks. I went rook to e8. Now, as you can see from the bottom of the computer screen, it's basically even. White has a tiny advantage. I wouldn't call it one. But you're going to see in the endgame, I have this huge advantage. And for some reason, I had trouble trying to figure out. He was going to queen a pawn, and maybe even mate me. And sometimes you just get so tired, and sometimes you see ghosts that aren't there. So those of you, don't be afraid, jump right in, and you'll see when we get towards the end here, it was a 1 game, and I blew it. And he went e4. He started to move his pawns. I went king to b8. Don't know why I did that. To this day, as I go over this game, I went over earlier tonight, I still don't know. Oh well, these things happen. Sometimes your mind just plays tricks on you and you see ghosts that aren't there. He went d5, and I went knight to a6. I'm going to try to reroute my knight here towards more center square, go after his pawns here. That was my thinking at the time. And he went rook to e1. He's going to get his rook behind his pawn. I went bishop to b4. Excuse me, pinning his knight. He moved his king to h1. I moved my rook on to f8, get him towards the center of the board, and he went g4. He's starting to push his pawns right away, which is a little surprising to me. I guess he's trying to get rid of my f-pawn so he can push his center pawns and get me in a bind. I went knight to c5, put my knight towards the middle where it'll do some good. And he went knight to g3. He must be bringing up his knight. He's guarding his e-pawn here, which is a very important pawn for him. I can't move my c-pawn to here, so he's going to push, and it's going to be difficult for me. So he went knight to g3. I went knight to d7. I'm going to bring my knight around. I'm going to try to get him in this nice central spot right here on e5. He went rook on e to f1, doubling up his rooks. He's going to try to push his pawn here, try to bust up my pawns a little bit so he can push his center pawns. I went knight to e5. I centralized my knight. He went rook to e3. And I went rook to d8. He went knight to f5. And I kicked his knight, g6. He went knight to d4, bringing his knight around center of the board. It's going to be a big fight over the center. And I went bishop to c5. I'm pinning his knight. He went rook to d1. Now you see that his rook is covered in case he ever takes. His rook here isn't free. The knight is covering the rook. I went c6. And he went b4. I took his knight on d4. He took with his rook. Centralized my other rook. And he went b5. I thought about taking for a while. I didn't want his knight to get in here when he retakes. That's a really good spot. He can cause me some trouble. I really didn't want it there. I didn't want to move this pawn and chase him off and weaken my pawns. So I moved up to c5 to hit his rook. He moved back rook to d1. I went rook to d6, stopping his pawn, maybe doubling up in the future. Get some pawns here, go after this pawn. He went a4, and I went b6. This is to shore up my c-pawn here. He went king to g2. He's going to bring his king in. King's a really powerful piece in the endgame. He's worth the piece. He played king to g3. He's moving his king up. And I went knight to f7. I was going to move my knight here. Put as many pieces as I can on his e-pawn. He doubled up his rooks on the e-file. And I decided to go back to e5. Just waiting to see what he's going to do before I decide what I'm going to do. He went king up. And I checked. And he moved his king back. I've moved rook here. What I was trying to do was push my pawn to here, open up this a little bit. He could move his rook here, and then after I take, he can't retake with the king because of the knight. He takes with the pawn, he loses his rook. He went rook h1. I went h5 anyway. And he took. And I took. Now at this point, I was thinking to myself, okay, I do have a backward f-pawn, but he's got an isolated h-pawn. And my pieces are pretty much surrounding his king. If I can bring my king over to the king side, maybe we can get some play. We'll see how it works out. I think I had the advantage at this point. As you see on the computer, I have a slight advantage. Slight is better than none. Move 39. He went h4. And I went rook to d7. Now he can't take. Pawn takes pawn because of the fact he loses his rook here. And what I was going to do is my rook on d7, I was going to bring here to g7, or excuse me, h7, and double up and maybe win that pawn. That was my idea. He went rook to e2. Going to double up his rooks to save that pawn. And I went rook to g7. That way when I take his pawn, it's a discovered check. He can't move his king up. He can't move his king to here because the knight's guarding that spot to attack my rook. He went rook to g2. I played g takes h, double check. He went king h3. Now as you can see, I'm going to go back a move here. You see the points start really going up for me. After move 42, I'm over 2 points ahead. That's a lot, especially in an endgame. I'm a pawn up right now. After move 42, king to h3. Now the move I made was rook takes g2, and he played king takes. And I went rook to g5 check. And he went king to f1. I went rook to g4, go right after his e-pawn. I'm going to try to hit it as many times as I can. He went rook h3. Now here I probably should have started bringing my king over. Over here, over here, over here, and start moving my king as I get towards that side of the board. I didn't. It's pretty much set now. He can't get to my f-pawn, and that's probably what I should have done. Unfortunately, hindsight's 20/20. I went knight to g6. I was thinking about bringing my knight here to attack his rook, try to get some play on his king. That was my thinking at the time. And he went d6. He's going to move his d-pawn. And I went king to c8. And he played knight to d5. Hitting my f-pawn at the same time and centralizing his knight. Now I can't save that pawn with the rook because it affects knight takes. So I took the e-pawn. He went rook to f3. I went rook to e6, protecting that pawn. He can't check me here because the knight is guarding that square. Played rook takes f6. Rook takes, knight takes. Now we're at move 50, and as you can see, I'm up almost 5 points, almost 5 pawns, which we all know is a rook. I should have won this game easily. Easily. But this is where, excuse me, I was analyzing. Why? I can't get to his knight with my king because the pawn is guarding that square. I can't really move my king up to block the pawn. So I felt this paralysis that wasn't really there. Now if you look on the computer, it says knight to f4 or c4. That's what I should have done. I should have started pushing my c-pawn here, push my c-pawn to there, and bring my knight in to guard that pawn. That way the king can't take the knight. It's kind of like two connected passed pawn. You take the back pawn, the other pawn will queen. And why I didn't think of that, I have no idea. Sometimes you do what you just do. I figured I'd bring my knight around and pick up his A and B pawn. That was my thinking. What I did was I let his king get in. King to g2. Instead of pushing my c pawn again, as computer said, I didn't. I went knight to c4. I figure I'm going to go here with my, my knight's going to go there. I'll pick up that pawn. Then I'll move my knight here and pick up this pawn. That was my thinking at the time. It didn't seem like too bad of a thought. It seemed like this game was over. And as you can see from the bottom score, it is over. But it's not over till it's over. You went king to h3. And I continue with knight to b2. King takes h4. You see again, the computer says, push the c-pawn. I was afraid his knight was going to come back. Sometimes you just see demons that aren't there. I mean, this is such a one game, it's crazy. And I remember sitting there, and I was figuring out, you know, all the different moves with his knight. Instead of worrying about ghosts that weren't there, I should have been worrying about myself winning. I should have been pushing my pawn. 53. King takes h4. I took his a pawn, just like I had planned. And now comes his king. King to g4. Again, the computer says, c4. Push the pawn. And on top of that, now that I look at this, I was so worried about him coming in and moving this pawn to here, or getting his king close by and putting his knight there. If I had pushed the c-pawn, I could have placed my knight on that square there. And if I had my knight on c5, the game was over. But unfortunately, sometimes you just look at things and you look at it in hindsight later. Okay, 53. Knight takes a4. He went king to g4, excuse me. I went knight to c3. I'm figuring I got this game bagged. King to f5, and here he comes. I'm figuring not a problem, right? Got the game won. Knight takes the b pawn. What could possibly go wrong? And here it comes. King e6. I'm thinking what to do. What to do? Okay, let's back off his king. I went d4 check. He went king d5. And I finally get my pawns rolling. After all those knight moves, I should just push my c-pawn originally and forgot about his pawns and concentrated on that. Unfortunately, I was worried about demons that weren't there. He pushed his pawn check. I went king to d8. Now before I move, I want you to look at the score on the bottom of the screen. Currently, I'm up over 3 points. She just dropped back down. I blew this game. When he went king to d5, I pushed the A pawn. I should have moved my king. I didn't. I got spooked. I was worried about him pushing his pawn and then bringing his knight up and then checking me with his knight and mating me is what I was concerned about. So what I had to do is I had to stop him from getting to this square later down the road. The knight had come there with the pawn pushed and the king behind the pawn. He would have went from the G8 square to the E7 square and tried a mating net. I wasn't thinking, and he checked me. And I moved king to D8. Now, as you're looking on the screen, I am 2 full pawns up, but I'm only up 0.34 on the score. It was discouraging. I shook my head. I didn't know what to do. He went king to D6. Now, here's my problem. He's going to move his knight around. He can go here first with the knight, and then he can go here with the knight. And of course, his last move would be here with the knight, mate. So that's 1, 2, 3 different moves. And that was my concern. That's what I was worried about. I was thinking, oh boy, what am I going to do now? What I should have done, so I got spooked. I got panicky. I didn't know what to do. I felt ridiculous because I had a 1 game and now I'm blowing it. So I went A4. I figured, get him off my back. He went knight to E4. And I went knight to F5 check. I'm panicky now. Because he's going to next move his knight here. And then move his knight here, mate. And that was my concern. What do I do? What do I do? I started panicking. And thinking to myself, all this work and all this effort, for what? And he went king F5 check. And he moved king to C6. And we drew. What I was worried about, even if I push this pawn, even if I push my A pawn up, he would have brought his knight to here, and I couldn't stop it. And his next move, of course, would have been here. So the problem is, unless I'm missing something here, and as you can see from the score, it's dead drawn. I have to check him again here. I have to do perpetual. He has to stay on one of these 3 squares in order to mate me in 2 moves. And I blew it, and I just wanted to tell you that sometimes you're just paralyzed from your analysis. You let your fear take over instead of looking at it objectively. I probably should have walked away from the board. I'm trying to recall what my time was on my clock, and I didn't. I remember it was later in the day. I was pretty tired. And don't let your fear take control of your mind. Let him worry about you instead of you worrying about him, especially with a 1 game. So I'm going to call this game Paralysis by Analysis. There was a ton of mistakes made by B in the end game, a 1 end game. And it's not Grandmaster chess, but we're not Grandmaster players. I'm not, and most of the people that watch these videos, and 99% of the players out there aren't. We just love the game. Sometimes, like this game, it is incredibly frustrating. And you shouldn't beat yourself up too much. Hopefully you can learn from this kind of thing. You ever get a similar position in the future, let him worry about you. I should have pushed my c-pawn 4 or 5 moves ago, long before his king got in. So that's my game for today. I want you to remember that if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. And I hope you all will see you in the future in my next videos. Thanks everybody. Bye bye.